This is Cooking with SNS again. We're going to make some homemade toffee. And sometimes I have unconventional ways, sometimes I don't, but either way, it always comes out good. Here's the way I do it. We start off with a baking pan, some parchment paper. I prefer the unbleached, but up to you. Or you don't even need it. But I prefer the parchment paper because it makes it easier to clean up. We're going to start out with boiling. Okay, I misspoke. Melting down a pound of butter or half pound of butter. It depends on what your recipe is and how much you're doing. I'm doing a half pound right now. I know it calls for more, but right now this is what I'm doing. You take this butter here and you melt it down. As it melts down, you get your brown sugar. And they call for dark brown sugar, but I just use, depending on the price. If you want to do it cheap, buy the light. It works out the same. Buy the light brown sugar. And that's a cup of brown sugar. Yeah, it calls for, like I said, a pound of brown sugar, or a pound of butter. I do a half pound or a cup. And then I do brown sugar, a full cup of that too. So I kind of do the recipe more than they call for, but it always comes out good. And you still have enough if you do a cup and a cup. So just do half a pound of butter and a full cup of sugar, brown sugar. And I usually go a little bit more with the brown sugar, but that's up to you. There's many ways that you can do it. And unfortunately, I like to pack my brown sugar, so I get more than a cup. I'll be honest. So yeah, you've seen it's packed, and I still do a little bit more of the brown. There's some top there. Okay. There's over the cup and brown sugar. You let your butter melt down. And you let it melt down till it's just about melted. Then you put the brown sugar in there. Get yourself a double boiler going. Even though that's the way most of them don't say to do it, but this is the way I do it. I keep a boiler pan going because as you melt down your butter and whatnot, and if you have two pans, it works out better. Actually, I only have one pan, so I'm doing one pan at a time, but it all still works out almost the same. And most recipes call for chocolate chips or whatnot, semi-chocolate chip or the semi-sweet. I like to use almond bark. It's up to you. You do it how you want to do it. Yeah, the one I'm doing tonight isn't going to be a total toffee, but I like to do stuff my way, and that's my way, and you can find different ways of doing it, and let your mind expand and figure out the way you like it. Don't take my word for it, just do it the way you want to do it. Like I said, I change recipes all the time, but no, I'm melting down the butter. I have my brown sugar over here. Have my boiler pan going, which, like I said, I only have one pan here, so I have to do it a little bit differently, but it all works out one way or the other. Yeah, they say that not even to do the boiler pan, but to me, it makes it better. It makes it easier. Then, like I said, I like to use the almond bark, but you can use chocolate chips. But take your chocolate chips, you take your, once this is all melted down, and I boil my sugar and butter for they say 3 to 5 minutes. I say 5 to 10 minutes. And make it into a nice caramel. Now, okay, I missed a step all the way in between, and that's my bad. That's my bad. So we need to go back and do that, and I'll show you here soon. Okay, we're back. And what I forgot to tell y'all, I started to and I forgot. You take a cookie sheet with some walls on it. So a cookie sheet. And most of them don't call to put the parchment paper down, but I prefer the parchment paper. It makes it easier in the long run for cleaning, for one. Two, getting them off the sheet. So, but it's up to you. You don't have to use the parchment paper if you don't have it. But now, you put your piece of parchment paper down. Then you line it with your saltines, which is usually about one sleeve of crackers of your saltines. Sometimes you may have less, sometimes you may have more, depending on the size of your flat pan. Okay, well, here is the crackers on the bottom of the pan. Like I said, I like to do parchment paper. It just makes it easier to do everything. As I said, you're melting down your butter. You should melt down quicker than this, but I'm doing it at a lower heat because I don't like doing high heat. But you do it at your temperature. To me, I like everything to be slow. Even though it pisses me off at times, that shit's not getting done. You know, you put your double boiler on. And like I said, I have to do this because the way I do it, if I was going to do it truthfully, if I had two good pans, if I had another pot like this, I'd rather have my chocolate melted, but it really doesn't matter at this point because once you get your butter melted, your butter and your sugar melted and come to a boil, that's already gonna, if you have two pans. And you still have to put it in the oven for 6 to 8 minutes before this. So, once this melts down a little bit more, we'll get back to doing the brown sugar. And I'll show you what it looks like once it comes to a boil. Sometimes I overboil it, other times I don't, but it works out. One way or the other. Okay, if you're using almond bark, while you're waiting for your butter to melt to put the brown sugar in, go ahead and cut up your almond bark into 3.5 to 4 pieces. I like to use 4 pieces. Sometimes I go a little bit over, sometimes I keep it at 3. And they don't call for this, but I always put butter in with my almond bark, and even my chocolate chips. Yes, they don't call for you to melt down your chocolate chips, but to me, it just spreads a little bit easier if you do. So, therefore, we're going to cut this here. There's 3. That would be 4, or that'd be 3.5. But I'll keep this half for something else. Okay, well, here's the 4 pieces of almond bark broken into cubes. But to me, I like to break them down a little bit more. They just melt a little bit faster. Like I said, I usually add a half stick of butter to it when I do go to melt it, just because it adds better flavor. At least that's my opinion. And even when I use chocolate chips, I still put butter in there, and about the same amount. You can maybe cut back between a quarter stick to a half stick. But hell, to me, I still use a half to whole stick. Truthfully, with this, I'd probably use for my liking. But right now, I'm not making for my liking. I'm making it for a customer, so therefore, I'm going to cut it back to a half to a quarter stick of butter when I melt it. You don't have to. To me, it just gives it a little bit better taste. All right. Okay, we have the butter melted now. It's for the most part. So now you take your cup of brown sugar. Just go ahead and pour that in there. Clean out the bottom of it. I'm not going to do it right now. I'll do it once I get off camera. But you take that and you just break it down. You just break it down and you stir it in just a little bit at a time. Just let it stir in. After you get that stirred in, then go back and get your what's left in the bottom of your measuring cup. Let this come to a boil for 3 to 6 minutes. And we'll be back in soon. Now that the sugar's in here with the butter, you just stir it every once in a great while. Make sure it's not sticking to the bottom of the pan. But you want to make sure, like I said, that it boils. And I'll show you the final boil instead of boring you with the stirring. That's one thing I hate about this is letting it boil. Don't rush it to boil, because if you rush it, you're going to burn your sugar and your butter. So take your time and let it happen as it happens. It's starting to boil, as you can see, but don't pull it off just yet. You need to take it and you stir it. You need to make sure all of it's been crystallized or turned into a caramel. So now you need to kind of stir it here and there. But no. But at the same time, you don't want it to get too thick. So if it's too thick, it won't spread the way it should. Okay, yes, I'm pulling a little bit early, but that's only because I like it that way just a little bit better than the way they say it should be, because it spreads a lot easier. Yeah, it should be thicker than this, but if you do it right, you can make it work. So now we take this, stirring it. It looks good. It probably should boil about another minute, but I don't like to do it that way. I like to take it and come over here. Just kind of do a woo around it all. I'll take that and spread it throughout the crackers. Yeah, it's a little bit thin. I know. It's not as thick as it should be. But if you do it right, it doesn't really matter. It does matter to a point, but you don't want to pull it too soon. At the same time, you don't want to pull it too late. Then you just take it and you kind of spread it around the pan till everything's covered. This is the reason I don't like to boil it the whole way, because it makes it harder. The more it boils, the harder it's going to spread. But like I said, you don't want to do it too soon, But at the same time, you want it to be thick but thin. And you just kind of spread it so it's totally even across them all. I know that's not completely even yet, but once I get done spreading it, it will be. Still, it's not completely 100 spread it evenly, but it's damn close, if you can see what I'm talking about. So from here, you take this and you put it in the oven. Okay, now it's in the oven for 5 to 6 minutes, depending on your oven temperature. They say 350. Well, it depends on which one you look at. Some say 250. I like 350, but my oven doesn't cook at the correct temperature. And they talk about just pouring the chocolate on. Now, I like to do a double boil with my chocolates. It doesn't matter if I'm using the if I'm using chocolate chips or almond bark. Now you drop your almond bark in there. Like I said, I like to use butter, so I drop in between a quarter of a slice, but I like to use a half pound. That's just me, because it just gives it better flavor. Yeah, this would melt down if I just left it there, but I like to do the boil. I need to throw some butter in there, and then we'll go back to there. Okay, well, there's the chocolate and the butter in there. You let it melt, you stir it, you let it melt, you stir it, and you just keep on doing it. Yeah, the oven still says, the timer on the crackers and the toffee, or the butter mix, butter brown sugar, still says 2.5 minutes. But this should melt down enough on the temperature with your double boiler. Yeah, they don't call for that, but I like to do it. To me, it's easier. Alright, well, I'll come back to you here in just a few. With your chocolate, you want to make sure you stir it quite often, or else it's going to burn. And I've actually done a little bit more than I should have. The timer's already went off for the crackers and butter mix. So I need to actually get this off of the hot side and get my crackers out. And truthfully, yeah, it will melt even without doing it this way, but to me, this is a lot easier than letting it try to melt and trying to spread it, in my opinion. So, here are the crackers out of the oven. You can see some are more done by others, but it all works out about the same. It just gives it that little glaze. Then we take the chocolate and we pour it over top, kind of like so. And no, I got it too thick, so I'm going to have to scoop it out, so you're going to have to wait a second. Here's a little bit of it, and then you just take it and you spread it. I'm going to have to come back and take the rest out of the pan. Hopefully it doesn't get too thick before I get back to it. And if it does, well, all you gotta do is reheat it, and sometimes you might have to add a little bit of milk to it, but whatever. As you can see, about half the pan done. This one didn't come out as good as the last one I did, but I think I let the chocolate melt a little bit too much, or stick too much, but I can fix that. I can. And so can you. Just take your time. Now, like I said, with this here, after you get the chocolate spread, There's so many different ways that you can make it up. One of my favorite ones is with bacon and almonds, or just bacon, because I'm a bacon lover. But, hell, you can do your pecans, you can do your just bacon, pecans, your almonds, depending on what you want with it. I still have probably not a half pan, I don't even know, but I can figure out a way to get more chocolate on these. If you understand what I'm saying. But you take that bacon or those toasted almonds, toasted pecans, or however you want to do it, and they come out fucking perfect. Part of my language there, but I have no other way to say it without saying that. But like I said, if it was for me, I'd be putting bacon on top of this. It just gives it that. But okay, I think y'all get the point. Here's how you do it. Then you take and put it in the freezer for a little while. Then you can break it up into crackers, or you can break it up into pieces and serve it as a yummy treat. Find your own way to make it if you want to. I've been known to make the chocolate with cayenne pepper. I've been known to make it other ways. It just depends on what you want to be done. Go at it. Okay, so now we're breaking it up. I already got it in a few pieces. You can either chop away, or just break it up by hand, depending on how you want to do it. And it comes out good. And you got little pieces of toffee. Hopefully y'all enjoy.